No matter where we are on gas prices are top of mind with consumers right now. And of course, with convenience stores selling 80% of the gas in the country, the question is, how might consumers behave wherever gas prices are? We have some answers. Joining us today is Adam Rosenblatt. He is a regular on the podcast. He's up there among the top contributors. He's with Bold Decision, which is a polling and analysis group that we've used. We've used Adam's expertise for the better part of 20 years to look at what do consumers say they like about convenience stores and what do they do at convenience stores. So we're going to talk about in April, the April NACS magazine has a story, first of a 5-part series in which we are looking at what consumers say about our industry. This one will focus on what do they do at the pump and what do you need to know about that. Future episodes, and probably a couple more times we can have Adam on, we'll look at how consumers define convenience. What are the important elements of customer service? What are the attitudes and actions related to food and food buying behavior? And then finally, the last one will be about tying it all together. What do they think of the customer experience? So forecasting what you'll see in NACS magazine and what you'll see on Convenience Matters in the next couple months. But probably best to say, welcome, Adam. Thanks for joining us again today.
Hey, happy to be on again.
So we have a variety of different surveys, and with you, we've done things that are annual surveys. We'll talk a little bit about, at one point, we did monthly surveys. We'll touch upon those a little later. But what we have done in 2026 is we've broken out into 5 different segments, a very large survey that we conducted in February. And so that we're parsing out the first parts of that in the April issue. And it's focusing on fuels. And one of the things that we're doing is there are 3 issues that we'd like to talk about. One is, what are some of the top line metrics associated with fueling? How do people shop for gas? And most importantly for retailers is, what can they do to get more of the business? So let's actually, Adam, I'll let you set up the whole idea of customer polling, why it's important, and what are some of the broad things that you saw related to this one, even if they go beyond fueling and look at things like customer attitudes in general.
So we took a look here at 1,207 American adults across the entire country. And a lot of the things that we're looking at are things that maybe change over long periods of time, but don't change from one day to the next. So we're looking at things like attitudes and behaviors and mindsets. So we're not necessarily looking in this particular survey at what they think of the gas price, but how they behave, right? Most people are not changing or buying a new vehicle every single day, right? They're doing the same habits. They're typically driving to the same types of places. They're typically approaching most situations, making the same types of decisions. So that's where we started off looking at a high level, how do they approach the world of gas buying, fueling up their vehicle even if it's with electric, right? They still need some sort of energy. But then we dive in as well into the other ways that convenience stores help fuel their lives, because it's more than just gas that the people are coming to.
So there's no way to predict gas prices, and we didn't do a flash survey when gas prices hit $3.50, $4, $4.15, where they currently sit, and we are Friday, April 10th. That's probably important to say, just in case for some crazy reason gas prices wildly swing or oil prices wildly swing one direction or the other. Right now, they're about $4.15 nationally. They vary across states. When we did the survey, they were about $2.80. So, but what we found over the years is there's some fairly consistent behavior, whether the first digit of the gas price is a 1, 2, 3, 4. Can't really talk about 5 because that was really only a couple days in 2022. But one thing that we found, Adam, is looking at the top line metrics, it's fairly consistent. This year we found roughly 3 in 4 people say the main reason they went to the convenience store was to buy gas, 72%. So when we look at gas prices, when we look at all these other things, while gas, only 1 in 4 transactions are at the pump, people who are buying gas say that's the main reason they went to the convenience store. And we'll talk about whether they go inside. But that's a hugely important number to look at when 3 in 4 say they went to the store because they were buying gas.
Yeah, I mean, for some of the people who come in, it's part of their routine. We actually found 31% of people who say they go to the convenience store just because it's part of their routine. And there's 1 in 5 who actually actively seek it out as a destination, right? It's part of it. For some people, right? For a lot of people, it's just part of, life. It's a necessity. That's actually most people, right? The car. And when we go into this in greater detail of exactly why mentally they fuel up, but to some people, hey, if you want to have a car, it has to have fuel, right? That's a requirement of the car. So yeah, the convenience store and the gas station is essentially attached to it. But for some people, about the other half, they're actually sort of looking forward or excited about the actual gas station and not just the gas part that goes into the car. And we dive into that part too, especially with frequent customers, because a lot of these customers are frequent customers.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned frequent because we have a couple different ways that we look at demographics. We have the traditional breakdown by age, and of course we see less so in this part of the survey looking at fueling behavior changes between 18 to 34-year-olds and some other groups. But we do have some things we can talk about there. We also look at it by region. We look at it by male, female. And then we also have some new ones that we look at, and we find out their frequency of what they say their purchase behavior is, and then we identify them as frequent or infrequent or rare consumers. And I think that's a really important thing that we'll dive into a little bit more. What do the frequent customers want? Because those are the ones that are most likely to be buying gas on a regular basis. They're most likely to be going inside the store on a regular basis. And they're possibly most affected by these higher prices. And there could be some behavioral things that we need to look at to ensure that these customers that you have today are your customers tomorrow. So we know that 62% of people who we asked people, the last time you bought gas, did you also go inside the store? 62% said they went inside the store. But of course, frequent customers, much more likely to go inside the store. And I think those are some of the things we'll look at a little bit more later, as well as another thing we looked at. The question is, are you better off this year or are you worse off this year? Because that also affects buying behavior right now with higher gas prices.
Yeah, a lot of people are in a negative mood right now. Economically, it's not the all-time worst that we've ever seen, but coming off on the heels of a war, or still in the midst of a war, depending on, again, literally people's point of view on those types of things. Though looking at the gas price, it's, again, very significantly different than where it was a month ago or even a year ago. So people are feeling that pain. But to bring it back to the convenience store, and especially those frequent customers, what's really neat to me is when we look at it, there's 1 in 10 who go in almost every single day, right? Maybe it's the same store they go to, maybe it's a different store. But a neat question that we looked at in the survey was, do you think most convenience stores are really all the same, or do they vary quite a bit? And most people actually think they vary quite a bit. Now, that could be good or bad, right? That's not necessarily in and of itself meaning that the variation is good, right? It could mean that some stores are worse and some stores are better. But there is that variety. And I think that's one of the things that we look at it in greater depth in the survey too, whether it's variety of products, variety of experience, right? Nobody really, unless they're drinking it, and I would not advise that, nobody really samples the gasoline, right? It goes into their car, right? It goes in there. Some people think or say that, hey, I get different performance, I get different experience, but the main product that they buy doesn't actually go into them. Whereas when they go into a convenience store, again, we looked at this too, self-checkout. Sometimes you're interacting with people, sometimes you're interacting with employees. There's an experience that goes with it, right? There's products. Some stores might carry a particular product, or it's a particular brand that makes a specific type of food or specific type of drink. Sometimes people like that, sometimes people don't. So that's one of the things that attracts people into convenience stores in a way that's different than most other types of retails, like a grocery store, where you can get the same box of Lucky Charms or Frosted Flakes or whatever you want at any given store. There is, I think, a bit more variety of all of these elements within a convenience store, even though actually, as you said, the main driving element is actually the drive that brought them to the store and the fueling experience. But to some degree, they don't actually interact with that main driver, the actual fuel itself.
Yeah, and going back to the idea of sipping gas, you probably don't spend enough time on TLC network, and there are some TV shows that focus on that, but that's not the topic of today.
Someone's strange addiction, I'm sure.
Yes, exactly. So, we looked at, and again, a lot of this is in the April issue, the May issue, the June issue, July, August. Some of these you will see soon. And so looking at the April issue, though, we looked at some of those basic metrics. You covered them. So the second thing we wanted to know is, how do people shop for gas? If you're of a certain generation, you probably think that most people said that, well, it's when my light comes on and when I know I only have 20 miles. Or it's I'm driving and I see this gas price and I say, that's what I'd like. But what consumers told us is they're really making the decision on when they buy gas before they even put their seatbelt on. And that's something I think is important for retailers to consider.
Yeah, we found that 76%, so 3 in 4 people, had their visit planned, right? In some form or fashion. There's only 1 in 4, 24%, who were doing it spontaneous. But most people were either planning it or it was sort of sometimes planned, right? Maybe it was something that they decided on the way. But it's not waiting until the last second. And again, I think it's because of all those different options that exist as part of the fueling experience. It's not just get fuel. Most people actually do choose to go into the store and do something else at the same time.
And another question we asked was about when do you decide to make your purchase? And 41% said before they get in the car. So I think that's a good transition to how can you right now, with people expressing economic concerns and economic pain, how can you get more of their business? And probably the easiest way, knowing, well, we asked the basic question, and this is when gas prices were $2.80 a gallon, just once again, level setting. We said, what are the ways that somebody could get more of your business? And of course, the first two things that they cited is, it's always going to be prices, but prices. And it was 33% said lower your in-store prices, 29% said lower gas prices. So hold on that for a second. In-store prices are affected by diesel prices, affected by all the other things going on. So one of the questions that we get from reporters and others is, we know gas prices are up. How does this affect in-store prices? This is an indicator that says that people are pretty sensitive to those in-store prices. So that doesn't mean lower your prices or even maintain your prices, but it means acknowledge on some level what consumers are going through with your prices inside the store if you're able to.
Exactly. Something that I noticed that was very interesting is we asked people, this is a new question we never did before, about, hey, we sort of know that that gas prices vary, right? And we see that acknowledged in the survey and a variety of other questions. They know gas prices vary. So let's talk a little bit about the store prices, right? Do the store prices vary? Do they tend to kind of vary by store? And they said, yeah, it depends on the store, similar to the way the gas prices vary within the community. Okay, most people agree on that general premise, right? That there's different prices for different products. But then we kind of combined both of those thoughts together and said, if you saw a store that had the more expensive gas price, do you think that means that the products in store are more expensive? And unfortunately, the answer is yes, right? So they actually have this sense that if I go to the more expensive station that's selling more expensive gas, that bag of chips, that drink might also be more expensive, which is actually, to me, that's a very concerning and dangerous thing because that might not be the economic reality, right? As you said, some things are gradually making all prices go up. But if one store and the other store across the street from each other are still selling the same price for the bag of chips, that store that has the more expensive gas is now losing customers, and they're not even gaining a benefit because of raising their prices if they're not raising their prices. But most people, actually 52%, assumed that the price of the in-store item is probably higher when they see the higher price sign. So that higher price sign now is, again, detracting people and detracting customers away from the store. And it's also bleeding into the store too, even if it's not actually economically bleeding in and causing higher prices. People think that it is, and that's impacting what decisions they're going to make on the road.
And then looking beyond our industry to often thought of competition. We asked, related to grocery stores and QSRs, quick service restaurants, who has deals? Because as you're talking about economic stress, oftentimes the best way to entice a customer is by offering some sort of deal. Yet when we asked consumers, where are you most likely to see deals? Convenience stores or grocery stores. And then we also asked convenience stores or QSRs. The answer wasn't very encouraging.
Yeah, unfortunately, most people reported seeing more deals and more offers at grocery stores rather than convenience stores. So we actually had 62% say that they see fewer sales and deals and discounts at a convenience store. But when we look at it for quick service, it's actually 54%. So maybe we're doing a little bit better. We're still losing in this scenario, but we're a little bit more competitive in terms of the types of deals that we have. Again, it could be the nature of certain stations and the certain businesses that are sometimes one and the same with quick serve, or people sometimes think of it as one and the same. But we are not seen, unfortunately, as a place that's doing deals as much as others. They do see them, right? They do report seeing them. We actually do have almost 50% of people saying that they see them often, very often or somewhat often. So it's good, but it's not great. Whereas most other places, you're guaranteed almost to walk into any grocery store and find something on sale, or walk into some quick serve restaurant and find some sort of deal being offered. It doesn't seem as guaranteed if you walk into a convenience store, at least in the eyes of consumers.
So there's a we let's call it we'd like to improve that, but let's think of it as a real opportunity for individual retailers to use that terminology, talk about deals, particularly with this climate of higher gas prices. But an even bigger one, Adam, is what we saw when we asked about loyalty programs. And if you think about loyalty programs, two things I think are worth mentioning. One, if somebody's using the loyalty program, that's where the conversation may start with what we talked about earlier. People go to the app, they find out what they want to get. That's how they make their decision. It's not what they see at the street corner with the gas price. And the loyalty program, the ability to hook them into that ecosystem, is particularly important for those frequent customers. And we found that frequent customers do have those convenience store apps. And it's really important, if you don't, to find a loyalty program, an app, or the equivalent to keep that loyalty of those frequent customers.
Yeah, among C-Store loyalty program members, more than half said they're more likely to shop because of the loyalty program. So it was up 53%. So to the degree of some of the other stuff we were talking about, if they can be priming these customers, pushing notifications out to them, right? And not just a card that somebody has, but if somebody, that they keep in their wallet, but if they actually have on essentially their digital wallet and they have their app and they have their phone and they're getting notifications saying, hey, today is, special deal Tuesday, we're going to have this. It's at least raising the awareness that there are deals. And it's also making people more likely to go and choose that as the place. Because again, they're going to go when they need gas, but they need to go in, or at least in my opinion, they need to go in for other reasons too, not just the urgent need when, I got to use the bathroom, or my car's out of gas. There's other options that they can be choosing convenience stores instead of saying, I'm going to go to a quick serve restaurant to fill in a meal now. Or, the economy is bad right now. I'm not looking at things so well. I need to go to the grocery store and do meal planning and do other stuff instead of eating out to save money. Because again, with gas price rising, with economic crunch, people are going to have to make tougher choices. And we've seen in the past, the hover mark often starts at $4 when they start to kind of change their behavior. And we're now past that point.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So first off, the stuff we just talked about is all in the April NACS magazine or in future issues of the NACS magazine. But a common a question that we get now, again from reporters and others, is gas prices hit $4 a gallon. What does that mean for consumer behavior? And it's a little premature to pull out the noise and all the other things that might be related to what is going on now with sales, whether at the pump or inside the store. But I had mentioned that we've worked with you, Adam. I remember going through 2008 for the first time we hit $4 gas and some of the questions we asked. But I think a couple things that are worth looking at is the last couple years when prices had been elevated after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In 2023, we titled the article related to our survey as selling fuel to people in a bad mood, because at the time they were coming off $5 gas. It was still in the mid threes. And we asked questions. One of the questions we asked in that year is, what does gas have to get to before you change your behavior? And again, they were at about 380. The average response was 451, which equates to $4.80 a gallon in today's prices. But we're typically finding that high fours, maybe $5, is what people say they would, if prices hit that, they will change their behavior.
Yeah, we've seen for years, we almost stopped asking it about how much does the gas price impact your driving decisions? It has an impact for almost everybody, right? They start to scale back how much they drive. They consider, is this an essential errand or not? But once the prices hit a particular peak and once they stay there, it starts to have long-term ramifications, right? And some of these don't happen overnight, but people over time start to think about new things, saying, maybe the next car I get needs to be more fuel efficient, right? Maybe that needs to increase on the scale of things that matter to me. You know what? Maybe I actually will think about an electric car, right? They start to think about those types of elements. What we saw most recently in 2024 was there was like a $4 when people would start to think about reducing how much they drive. And at $5 is where they would really start to actively seek out differences. So again, some of these numbers start to change over time. But we're getting close to some of these numbers again. And the other piece that I would point out that we've seen in the past, and has been observed many, many times, is people are very, very quick to notice the gas price go up. They are very, very slow to notice the gas price going down. I'm sure this has been mentioned before on the podcast by somebody else or multiple other people, but that's one of these complexities that we're going to have to deal with, that even if the price actually does drop on the sign, people will still have the image sort of burned in their mind. Even if the screen literally changes, it's sort of like a digital display board, where a picture gets burned in. It gets burned in their mind, and they say, oof, prices were really high, especially with certain prices. When you think about California, when you think about the West Coast, when those prices are significantly higher to begin with, and that burns into their mind, it starts to actually have long-term ramifications, even if the gas price doesn't stay high for a long time. And that's, I think, what we're seeing over and over again is people are, they're not happy about it, but they're getting accustomed to seeing higher and higher prices as opposed to lower and lower prices. Aside from inflation on everything else, which people, they're not happy about it, but to some degree, people have gotten used to that type of stuff.
Yeah, and you had sent me something about a California retailer that was charging $9.99 for fuel. I actually put 5 nines there, $9.99 or 0.9, 4 nines. And one of the things that it probably wasn't a really good soundbite for our industry, I can't charge more than that because the pump doesn't go higher. Not something that we really want to hear as an industry, but obviously there were some issues in California related to not just California, but where that person was located, the volume, et cetera, that made that very unique. But of course, that's the thing that gets national news. We also, when we've had these higher prices, 2008, they topped $4 in July. But by year's end, they were $1.61. We went through this dramatic cycle of rapidly falling prices as we fell into the Great Recession. And in 2023, they were over $5 a gallon for, I think, less than 2 weeks. They stayed in the fours for a while, but our experience at these elevated levels, the last 2 cycles have been at a new number, but then adjusting downward. And we don't know where the number will go this time because there's a lot of things that are still very unclear with the Strait of Hormuz and things like that. So it remains to be seen how consumer behavior will change short term. But I think it's really important, Adam, your point, that long term, the longer there are elevated prices and perceptions of elevated prices, the more likely there will be a more dramatic change in behavior, whether it's a new vehicle, whether they cut out some sort of excursion. Now, we've looked at numbers over the years, and there's not usually a significant drop in vehicle miles traveled per vehicle. It's about 30, 31, 32, 33. It stays in that range. And that's partially because the gas price has fallen down. So we've talked about the numbers. We've talked about the numbers that we saw in 2026. We've talked about the numbers that we've seen over the past 20 years. We'll be parsing out more of these numbers, Adam, but based on what we have talked about today and what we're going to be talking about, what is a big message or two for retailers to think about right now? Today, gas prices are $4.15 nationwide. They're higher in some areas, they're lower in others. We don't know where they're going. What is something that retailers should think about today?
Absolutely. I think the interesting thing that we've mentioned before in the past is also taking a look at the customers and not thinking of them all the same. Right. And I don't just mean in the usual demographic ways of, I've got some who are older or younger. I have men I have women. I have some who buy more and some who buy less. But the actual types of customers who come in, you have some who are coming in all the time, who are very frequent, right? You have your daily customers who their names and they know your names. That's one set of customers that has one set of needs. That's great. You need to sustain them. You have a middle batch too that's very, very important. And then there's another batch that you might not understand as well. Again, if you're in an area where it's a person who randomly came in once because they're just passing by, you might never see them again. But again, maybe you've got a cool, interesting story about your store that they'll remember for the rest of their life. Or alternatively, something horrible, and then they tell everybody about it, and that's bad for you. So you want to avoid that as well. But with those 3 segments of buckets, finding ways to cultivate all of them, right? To get the people who only came in once to say, that was a cool store, I want to go back. Get those people who are in the middle bin to say, ooh, this is good, I want to go there every single day. And those people who go there every single day, there's something exciting and drawing them to you right now. Guess what? The guy down the street or, the gal up the block, she might catch on to what you're doing, and her store might try and do the same and steal those customers. So you have all three of those, and looking at the customers through that view is actually more important than just saying, I've got some who are under 35, I've got some who are over 65, because it's a mixed bag and it really varies based on your community. Some stores are urban, some are rural, some are suburban. So you have different types of customers there. But thinking about it that way, because a lot of times when we talk about customers, we're just approaching it in the usual demographics and not based on the frequency. And it's tough because they don't have, unless you have a loyalty app, which by definition puts them in probably the higher tier, you don't have a way of seeing this. Most of the stuff I just described is a completely invisible trait. For the people who are not the daily customers who, you already know, or the extremely frequent customers who you know very well. But that would be the thing that I would look at. And that's some of the stuff that we're going to look at further in the future, particularly how to retain those customers who are sort of lower down on the tier and how to foster stronger relationships with them.
So I'll close with whether you like politics or not. What Adam and team do, besides working with NACS and other customers, is they run campaigns for political candidates. What are the messages at work? What do you need to think about? And how do you run a winning campaign? So let's just think about the last few minutes as some of that campaign guidance, what you might need to do as a business to run a winning campaign, to grow your customers, or at least maintain your customers in some pretty difficult times that they're going through. So we look forward to talking to you more, Adam, about winning strategies to keep and grow your customer base. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Good luck on the campaign of keeping your customers.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.